Something happened in Abu Dhabi that almost nobody expected, and certainly not Lewis Hamilton. The postseason test is usually a quiet wrap-up to the year. Drivers get their laps in, teams gather final tyre data, and everyone heads home. But this time, Ferrari rolled out something that stopped Hamilton in his tracks. He climbed out of the mule car after his first run, looked over at the engineers, and simply said the day was eye-opening. And the more you look at what Ferrari tested, the more you understand exactly why. This wasn't a routine session. It was a preview of a team trying to rewrite its entire future before 2026 even arrives. From the very beginning of the test, it was clear Ferrari had no intention of treating this like a normal end-of-season program. While other teams focused on tyres and young drivers, Ferrari went in a completely different direction. They brought a modified version of the SF25, built specifically for low downforce running, something that instantly hinted at deeper goals. The car looked different, behaved different, and carried systems that have never been seen on a Ferrari before, and Hamilton felt those changes immediately. Instead of the stable, high downforce platform he'd used all season, the mule car moved in ways that forced him to rethink how the entire 2026 concept might operate. For someone who has spent years mastering predictable aero platforms at Mercedes, this test was a shock to his system. One of the first things Hamilton noticed was how the car responded through medium-speed corners, the exact area Ferrari struggled with all year. Instead of fighting understeer or snapping rear grip, the mule behaved in a way that suggested Ferrari was trying to train the chassis for a completely different aerodynamic environment. With the downforce dialed back, the car became far more sensitive to load shifts and weight transfer. This allowed the engineers to see how it reacts when the massive aerodynamic grip Formula One currently relies on is suddenly taken away. And that matters, because in 2026, with active aero systems and reduced drag, teams won't have the luxury of leaning on the downforce levels they enjoy today. But the biggest surprise of the entire day sat right at the front of the car. Ferrari had fitted an early version of their active front wing system, a key piece of technology for the 2026 regulations. Instead of running a fixed flap, the mule used a hidden actuator inside the nose to change the wing angle at speed. This gave Hamilton his first real taste of how the aero modes of the future will feel, and the feedback he provided is now shaping the hardware Ferrari will build over the next 12 months. And that's the real story behind this test. Hamilton didn't just drive laps, he witnessed the first steps of Ferrari's 2026 revolution. And what he felt behind the wheel explained why he walked away from the session more intrigued and more surprised than anyone expected. Ferrari's decision to treat Abu Dhabi as a testing ground for the future didn't happen by accident. Inside the team, there is a growing belief that 2026 isn't just another regulation change. It's a reset button, a chance to shake off the weaknesses that held them back in 2025. That mindset shaped everything they brought to the test. Instead of gathering simple tyre data, Ferrari used the session to study how a car behaves when it's stripped of the aerodynamic comfort zone they relied on all season. They wanted to understand how the chassis breathes when the downforce disappears. And the mule car gave them exactly that, a platform that forced every component to work harder without the huge aero cushion of modern F1. Hamilton quickly noticed how different the car felt as he built up speed. Without the heavy downforce loading the tyres into the asphalt, every input became more meaningful. A small steering change carried more weight. A slight lift on corner entry shifted the balance in a way he hasn't felt for years. The mule car wasn't unstable, but it was raw, exposing how Ferrari's mechanical platform behaves when the aerodynamics are not doing most of the work. This is the kind of information Ferrari desperately needed. In 2025, the team struggled to understand whether their medium-speed issues came from their aero concept, their suspension setup, or a mismatch between the two. The reduced downforce mule removed that confusion and forced the engineers to confront the base behavior of the chassis. But the real focus of the test was the interaction between the active front wing and the rest of the aerodynamic package. The 2026 rules will rely on two main aero modes, often called X mode and Z mode, where both front and rear wings must shift together to change the aerodynamic state of the car. Ferrari's mule ran only the front half of this system for now, but that alone revealed how much work still lies ahead. Hamilton reported that the transitions between flap angles felt smoother than expected, especially at high speed. What Ferrari wanted to learn was how quickly the airflow around the nose would reattach after the wing returned to its neutral position. If the airflow sticks cleanly, drivers can switch modes aggressively. If it stutters, the car becomes unpredictable, especially in wheel-to-wheel battles. Ferrari's actuator design also stood out in the pit lane. Compared to the system Mercedes was seen testing, Ferrari's packaging appeared tighter and more integrated into the nose structure. That doesn't automatically mean faster response or better performance, but it does suggest a different design philosophy. Ferrari seems determined to make the active aero system as compact and efficient as possible, likely to maintain stability under rapid load changes. The more compact the system, the easier it becomes to control how the car behaves when switching between modes mid-corner. By the time Hamilton completed his early runs, it was clear Ferrari was no longer thinking about fixing the SF25. They were building something entirely new, and the mule car was simply the first glimpse of a project designed for a different era of Formula One. While the active front wing drew most of the attention, another major part of Ferrari's program quietly shaped the direction of the entire test: the prototype steering wheel Hamilton used. At first glance, it looked like a normal Ferrari unit, but a closer inspection revealed something different. The layout was simplified, the button clusters were rearranged, and several controls that normally require deep menu scrolling were brought to the surface. Ferrari wasn't trying to make life easier for Hamilton today, they were preparing him for what's coming in 2026. With active aero systems, drivers will be changing aerodynamic modes far more often. Those switches need to be placed where the driver can reach them without thinking, without searching, and without risking a mistake in a high-speed corner. Hamilton's history at Mercedes made him the perfect test subject for this experiment. When he gave his early feedback, the engineers gathered around the car almost immediately. Hamilton is known for being very specific about controls, especially when a new system affects how he manages the car in dynamic situations. The team wanted to know which inputs felt natural, which buttons required too much reach, and where his muscle memory clashed with Ferrari's current design. These small details may seem insignificant, but in racing, milliseconds matter. If a driver fumbles a mode change during a defensive move or an overtake, the consequences can be race-ending. Ferrari understands that the best hardware in the world is useless if the driver interface slows the reaction time. So they're refining these elements now, long before 2026 arrives, to give Hamilton a cockpit designed around instinct. But the steering wheel wasn't the only mechanical experiment on the mule. Ferrari also introduced what insiders described as a transferable rear-end solution, meaning certain components were built to help the team understand how the 2026 suspension might need to behave. Reduced downforce means the car must rely much more on mechanical grip, especially when accelerating out of corners or rotating through medium-speed sequences. The altered suspension pieces on the mule allowed engineers to see how the car behaved when the aero load was dialed back and the tyres had to work harder. Grip levels, weight transfer, and rear stability all became easier to map when the aerodynamic force was no longer masking the problems. These tests helped answer one of Ferrari's biggest questions from 2025. Were their handling issues caused by aerodynamics alone, or was the mechanical platform also holding them back? The mule's behavior suggested a deeper story. With less aero, the chassis revealed where it naturally resisted rotation and where it needed more flexibility. Hamilton could feel these changes immediately because they appeared in the exact parts of the track that exposed Ferrari's weaknesses earlier in the season. Instead of hiding behind high downforce levels, the mule forced the team to face the truth of the car's mechanical DNA. By the time Ferrari completed the morning session, it was already becoming obvious that this wasn't about squeezing more performance out of the SF25. This was about building a map, an honest, raw baseline of how the next generation Ferrari must behave if it hopes to thrive under the new rules. And Hamilton's feedback was the compass guiding that map forward. As the afternoon progressed, Ferrari pushed the mule car into even more demanding scenarios. With track temperatures rising and grip levels shifting, the engineers wanted to see how the reduced downforce setup behaved when the conditions were less forgiving. This is where Hamilton's experience became especially valuable. He has driven through hundreds of development cycles in his career, and he knows exactly how to sense when a car is reacting to the track or revealing something about its core design. Ferrari needed that level of insight because 2026 won't just change how cars create downforce. It will change how they live within the constantly changing surface of a race weekend. One key part of the program was long-run consistency. Ferrari asked Hamilton to complete extended stints to show how the mule dealt with gradual tyre drop-off. With so much less aerodynamic support, the tyres took on a far heavier workload. This allowed Ferrari to study how the new Pirelli compounds behave when they are forced to do the kind of heavy lifting that would normally come from the wings and floor. For 2026, this is critical information. The new rules will reduce aerodynamic dependency and bring tyre behaviour back into the spotlight. If a team misunderstands how the compounds react under a lighter aero platform, they risk designing a car that collapses in race conditions. Hamilton's feedback helped Ferrari spot where the mule lost grip, how evenly the tyres heated across the carcass, and whether the car stayed predictable once the rubber began to fade. Straight-line behaviour was another major area Ferrari wanted to explore. Unlike the other teams, their mule was allowed to run without the 300 km/h limitation, giving Hamilton the chance to experience full-speed aero transitions. This mattered because active aero is not just about cornering, it's also about drag reduction and reattachment at high velocity. During these runs, Hamilton focused on how the car settled when the flap angle changed, whether the steering remained stable, and how the chassis responded when load shifted suddenly at top speed. For 2026, these sensations could make or break a driver's confidence. If the car wanders or feels light during a mode switch, overtakes could become dangerous and defensive moves impossible. Ferrari wants to eliminate that uncertainty before the first race of the new era even begins. Comparisons with Mercedes also played an interesting role in this test. While both teams are exploring active aero concepts, Ferrari's system appeared more tightly packaged and built around smoother transitions. Mercedes ran a bulkier layout, suggesting they may be prioritizing robustness over compact efficiency. These differences don't point to a winner yet, but they do show how quickly teams are diverging in their interpretations of the new rulebook. Ferrari's approach seems rooted in making the car as predictable as possible, something Hamilton has always valued. And if the team can pair that predictability with strong drag reduction, they may find themselves with a competitive edge far earlier than expected. By the end of Hamilton's afternoon mileage, the test had become something much bigger than a simple trial of parts. It was starting to look like Ferrari was rehearsing for the first act of 2026. The mule wasn't running for performance. It was running to expose gaps, confirm theories, and push the engineers into a mindset built around the future, not the car they raced this season. While the technical systems drew most of the headlines, what Ferrari truly walked away with from Abu Dhabi was something less tangible, but far more important: clarity. For much of 2025, the team operated in a fog of conflicting data. Simulator predictions didn't always match what the car delivered on track, and small setup changes produced inconsistent results. The Abu Dhabi mule allowed Ferrari to reset that entire landscape. By stripping the car of high downforce, adding experimental components, and forcing it into the performance window expected for 2026, the engineers finally saw which areas of the SF25's design philosophy simply won't survive the upcoming regulation shift. Hamilton helped sharpen that clarity through his ability to identify how a car behaves when its aerodynamic support thins out. He repeatedly described moments where the mule revealed whether instability came from the aero concept, the suspension geometry, or the interaction between the two. Those distinctions matter. In 2026, the car will rely far more on the suspension to manage weight transfer, and Ferrari's test helped show whether their current mechanical thinking is strong enough to anchor next year's concept. With reduced downforce, the chassis's natural tendencies, its strengths, its limits, and its blind spots became impossible to hide. Ferrari's engineers spent much of the test comparing this behavior to their simulation models. Every time Hamilton pushed through a medium-speed section, the telemetry team watched closely to see how the load traces lined up with what they had predicted back in Maranello. Active aero simulations are complex because they require accurate modelling of flap angles, actuator behaviour, and airflow reattachment. If even one part of the equation is slightly off, the entire simulation becomes unreliable. One of the biggest wins from the Abu Dhabi session was a clean dataset without reliability issues. Ferrari didn't lose time to mechanical faults or sensor errors, which meant the correlation work could run without delays. For a team planning a major concept shift, clean data is gold. Tyre behaviour also formed a major pillar of Ferrari's new understanding. Pirelli's 2026 prototype compounds won't behave like the rubber used today. They are designed for a lighter aerodynamic load and different thermal patterns. Ferrari used long runs and back-to-back comparisons to identify how the compounds heated, cooled, and degraded when pushed through the mule's reduced downforce setup. This matters because 2026 will reward teams who can keep the tyres alive without relying on aero to compensate for sliding. If Ferrari can understand how the compounds react now, they can design their suspension and load distribution to complement that behaviour next year. All of this led to one unmistakable conclusion inside the garage. Incremental updates would not save Ferrari in 2026. A small adjustment here, or a minor upgrade there, was never going to be enough. The new rules demand a new foundation, and the mule test proved that Ferrari was already prepared to take that leap. The test didn't just show what needed to change, it showed that Ferrari is willing to confront those changes head-on. And for Hamilton, seeing this shift firsthand gave him a deeper look into how serious the team is about building something that breaks from the past, not just patches over it. As the sun began to set over Yas Marina, the atmosphere inside the Ferrari garage changed. What started as a routine data-gathering exercise had turned into something much more revealing. The engineers weren't just checking boxes anymore, they were starting to see the outlines of their 2026 car forming in real time. And Hamilton, who had now completed multiple stints across different conditions, had become the bridge between Ferrari's ideas and how those ideas actually felt at the limit. His insight carried extra weight because he wasn't comparing the mule to the SF25, he was comparing it to every championship-winning machine he has ever driven. That perspective is rare, and Ferrari knows it. Throughout the final runs, Hamilton focused on how the car blended mechanical grip with the shifting aero modes. This balance will make or break the 2026 cars. If the transition between modes feels too sharp or unpredictable, drivers will lose trust during the most important moments: late braking, mid-corner rotation, and wheel-to-wheel battles. Ferrari asked Hamilton to test several scenarios, lifting mid-corner to trigger load changes, applying throttle while the wing reset to neutral, and switching modes while entering a bend instead of waiting until exit. Every scenario revealed how the mule communicated its intentions to the driver. And that communication, that sense of whether the car talks back, is something Hamilton values deeply. Another important part of these late-day tests was the study of chassis flexibility under reduced load. Ferrari wanted to know how much the car twisted, how much it settled, and how quickly it absorbed bumps through sections of the track that expose weaknesses in structural stiffness. In 2025, these areas sometimes caused the SF25 to lose stability without warning. With the mule, Ferrari could finally see how the chassis behaved without aero hiding those issues. If the car flexes in a way that interrupts the tyre's contact patch, the 2026 car could become unpredictable. If it flexes in a clean, controlled way, it could help maintain grip when aerodynamics can't. Hamilton's feedback on these sensations will directly influence how Ferrari designs the new chassis's core structure. Internal sources later suggested that the team came away from this portion of the test with stronger confidence in their structural reset plan. Instead of recycling parts of the SF25's architecture, Ferrari now seems ready to design a new body shape and suspension geometry to suit the more dynamic aerodynamic environment of 2026. This is a huge shift from their approach in recent seasons, where the team often relied on adapting old concepts rather than replacing them outright. By the time Hamilton returned to the garage for the final time, both he and the engineers understood that this test had answered questions they'd been carrying all year. It gave Ferrari a direction, a true north, to build around. It also gave Hamilton something equally valuable, evidence that Ferrari is not drifting blindly into the regulation changes. They have a plan, they have intent, and now they have data that proves their ideas have real potential. For a driver entering the end of his career, that clarity is priceless. It's not just about hope or belief, it's about seeing the blueprint of a car that could suit him better than anything Ferrari has produced in years. When the engines finally went silent and the last bits of equipment were packed away, the true meaning of Ferrari's Abu Dhabi test slowly came into focus. On the surface, it looked like a simple post-season run with a modified car. But beneath that calm exterior, Ferrari had executed one of the most revealing development sessions they've had in years. Instead of treating the test like a loose end from 2025, they used it as the starting line for a completely new era. And Hamilton, more than anyone else, understood the weight of what he had just witnessed. He didn't walk away talking about lap times or tyre runs. He talked about direction. He talked about potential. He talked about how different the entire experience felt compared to anything Ferrari ran this season. For a driver who joined the team with hopes of rebuilding his legacy, this mattered deeply. He finally felt the early edges of a concept that aligns with his strengths. A car that rewards smooth inputs, offers predictable transitions, and gives him the ability to influence the balance through instinct rather than force. The mule wasn't perfect, but it showed that Ferrari is chasing a driving style closer to what Hamilton mastered during his most dominant years. Ferrari's engineers also left Abu Dhabi with something they haven't always had: confidence in their own plan. The data made it clear that 2026 can't be approached as a step forward from the SF25. It has to be a fresh start, built from ideas that match the new regulations instead of fighting against them. The mule revealed exactly where the SF25 concept runs out of road and where the next car must evolve. It highlighted where the chassis needs more flexibility, where the aero platform needs more stability, and where the mechanical setup must take priority when downforce fades. This clarity removes guesswork. It removes hesitation. And it gives Ferrari the chance to design a car that isn't haunted by the compromises of previous seasons. The bigger picture is simple. Ferrari is no longer reacting to its problems. They are attacking them early, openly, and with the courage to rebuild rather than repair. For the first time in a while, the team is not trying to save a concept. They are trying to replace it. And with Hamilton's experience guiding key decisions, Ferrari finally has a driver capable of shaping that transformation from inside the cockpit. Now the question is execution. The ideas are promising, the direction is clear. But 2026 will reward teams that move fast, think boldly, and refuse to be slowed down by tradition. Ferrari has given itself a head start with this test. They have the data, the understanding, and the commitment to build a new identity instead of patching an old one. Hamilton left the garage that day with something he hasn't always had since joining Ferrari: genuine optimism. Not hype, not hope, but optimism grounded in real feedback and real progress. He knows the road to 2026 is long, but for the first time, he has seen a glimpse of what Ferrari could become when everything aligns. And if the breakthrough they showed in Abu Dhabi evolves into a full, stable concept, then the shock Hamilton felt may only be the beginning of the story.